The rain fell in sheets that October evening, turning the supermarket parking lot into a maze of puddles that reflected the neon signs above. David Martinez was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from working double shifts at the construction site. His 5-year-old daughter, Emma, sat in the shopping cart, swinging her little legs as they hurried toward their truck. All he wanted was to get home, heat up some leftovers, and collapse on the couch. Then Emma's small voice cut through the sound of rain hammering against metal cars. "Daddy, look, she's crying all alone." David followed his daughter's pointing finger to the far corner of the parking lot, where a figure huddled beneath the broken awning of a closed store. Even from this distance, he could see the woman's shoulders shaking, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Every instinct told him to keep walking. He was tired. It was late. Emma needed to get home. But his daughter's brown eyes were fixed on him with an expression he'd seen before, the same look she gave stray cats and injured birds, full of innocent certainty that someone should help. "Please, Daddy," Emma whispered. David sighed, feeling the weight of his wallet in his back pocket. They had $43 to last until Friday's paycheck. But he turned the cart around, his work boots splashing through puddles as they approached the woman. She couldn't have been more than 25, younger than David had initially thought. Her clothes were soaked through, and she clutched a small backpack to her chest like it contained everything she owned. When she heard them approach, her head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, scrambling to her feet. "I'll move. I didn't mean to." "Hey, it's okay," David said, holding up his hands. "We're not here to run you off. My daughter was worried about you." The woman's eyes shifted to Emma, who had climbed halfway out of the cart, reaching toward her with one small hand. Something in the woman's face crumbled. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. David learned her story in fragments over the next 20 minutes, standing in that parking lot as the October wind howled around them. Sarah had been living with her boyfriend until 3 days ago when she discovered he'd been stealing money from her to fuel his gambling addiction. When she confronted him, he'd thrown her out with nothing but her backpack. She'd been sleeping in her car until it broke down that morning. A tow truck had taken it to an impound lot she couldn't afford to retrieve it from. "I have a job interview tomorrow," Sarah said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "At a dental office. It's a good job, with benefits and everything. But I can't show up like this. I can't even shower or wash my clothes. I'll lose this chance, and I don't know when I'll get another one." David felt something tighten in his chest. He thought about his own mother, who'd worked 3 jobs after his father left, who'd sometimes chosen between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. He thought about Emma, who was watching this entire interaction with the serious expression children get when they're learning something important about the world. "Come on," David heard himself say. "You're coming with us." Sarah's eyes widened. "What? No, I couldn't possibly. You have an interview tomorrow. You need a shower, a hot meal, and a place to sleep. We've got a couch." David caught the look his daughter was giving him, pure pride and admiration, and he knew he was making the right choice, even if it was terrifying to invite a stranger into their home. The drive back to their small rental house was quiet except for Emma's chatter about her kindergarten class. David watched Sarah in the rearview mirror, saw her press her forehead against the window and close her eyes. When they pulled into the driveway of his modest 2-bedroom house, she started crying again. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said. "You don't know me." David thought about it for a moment. "My daughter saw someone who needed help. How could I teach her to look away?" That night, while Sarah showered, David made spaghetti, the one dish he could cook without burning. Emma set the table with exaggerated care, placing a folded paper towel at each seat because they'd run out of napkins. When Sarah emerged, wearing a borrowed t-shirt and sweatpants that were too big for her, her hair wrapped in a towel, she looked like a different person. Over dinner, Sarah told them more about her life. She'd grown up in foster care, aged out of the system at 18 with no family support. She'd been putting herself through dental hygiene school while working retail, sleeping in her car between her apartment leases to save money. She was so close to finishing her certification. This job interview was supposed to be her fresh start. "I'll pay you back," Sarah insisted, her eyes shining with determination. "Whatever this costs you, the food, the water, everything, I'll pay it back." David shook his head. That's not how kindness works. You don't pay it back. You pay it forward. Emma, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. My mommy used to say that too. An awkward silence fell. David rarely talked about his late wife, who died from cancer when Emma was 2. But something about this night made the words come easier. My wife believed in helping people, David said softly. She'd bring home anyone who needed a meal or a kind word. I used to think she was too trusting, too generous. But she'd say that the world becomes what we make it. If we want kindness, we have to be kind first. Sarah was crying again, but this time she was smiling too. The next morning, David woke at 5 as usual. He found Sarah already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her interview outfit, a slightly wrinkled blouse and slacks from her backpack, laid out in front of her. She'd been trying to iron them with her hands. Let me help, David said, pulling out their old iron. By 7 o'clock, Sarah looked professional and polished. David drove her to the dental office, with Emma in her car seat in the back, still sleepy but insisting she wanted to come along for moral support. Thank you, Sarah said as they pulled up to the building. I don't have the words for what you've done for me. Go get that job, David said. That's all the thanks I need. 4 hours later, while David was at work, his phone rang with an unknown number. It was Sarah, and she was screaming with joy. She'd gotten the job. They wanted her to start the following Monday. That evening, David came home to find Sarah had cooked dinner using the meager ingredients in his pantry, transforming them into something that actually tasted good. Emma was showing her a drawing she'd made at school, 3 stick figures holding hands, with the words, "My family," written across the top in crayon. She drew you too, Emma explained to Sarah, pointing at the 3rd figure. Sarah stayed on their couch for 2 weeks until she received her first paycheck and could afford a security deposit on a room. But she never really left. She became the aunt Emma never had, the friend David didn't know he needed. She paid for groceries, helped with Emma's homework, and slowly became woven into the fabric of their small family. A year later, David stood in Sarah's new apartment, nothing fancy, but clean and safe in hers, watching Emma help her hang pictures on the wall. Sarah had been promoted to office manager. She'd saved enough to get her car out of impound and repaired. She'd even started taking weekend classes to finish her degree. None of this would have happened, Sarah said, standing beside David as they watched Emma arrange stuffed animals on the couch, if a little girl hadn't noticed someone crying in a parking lot. If her father hadn't taught her that noticing isn't enough, you have to act. David thought about that rainy October night, about how close he'd come to just driving past. How easy it would have been to look away. Emma taught me that night too, David admitted. She reminded me of who I wanted to be. Who my wife raised me to be. Children see the world as it should be, full of second chances and open hands. Sometimes, if we're lucky, they remind us to see it that way too. Sometimes a small voice saying, "Daddy, look," is enough to change everything, to turn a parking lot encounter into a family, to transform $43 and a couch into a future someone desperately needed. Because in the end, kindness doesn't cost us anything except the courage to act when our hearts tell us someone needs help. And the rewards, measured not in money but in the smiles of people we've helped rebuild their lives, are worth more than we could ever calculate.